belief. That's how. So good morning, brothers and sisters. I love you guys. So I'm a little nervous because, I'm vulnerable standing up here.
We love you, Jen.
Man. So the topic of vulnerability, I am going to get to the reading, but I want to say I meditated on that this morning, and it really came to me that when I am connected to God, which is love, which is truth, I'm safe in this world. I'm safe. And so I can live really open-minded and open-hearted. Yes. So it is. So that's what I'm doing up here. Theme for 2023 is living out loud. And the theme for April is the power of vulnerability. Today's topic, vulnerability, defining, and aligning. Dr. Ernest Holmes supports this topic with the following. Every one of us has within us the potential of the universe. There is an irresistible potential pressing against everyone for self-expression. If we listen, we shall hear it, not as a voice, but as a feeling, as a divine urge to express. Yeah. Sociologist Brené Brown, who I love, offers a definition. Vulnerability is a state of emotional exposure that comes with a certain degree of uncertainty. It involves a person's willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open and willing to love and be loved. And Adrian Posey writes, vulnerability lets in light. Let us mindfully affirm together, I bring my own unique expression to life and create a safe space for others to do the same. And now I want to introduce our very vulnerable and incredibly strong and courageous Reverend Dr. Kathleen Johnson.
Thank you so much, Jen. This is a great topic. We've touched on it for quite a bit throughout the past year, this idea of vulnerability. And so I am so grateful for myself and for all of us that we're going to delve into it more deeply, particularly since we're going to be, we have a circle going, but we're going to be starting some new circles soon. And in the circles, as well as in our classes, the power of vulnerability is something that will help us grow. But I'd like to start with a story, and this is one of my favorite Palm Sunday stories. And it starts off by saying it was Palm Sunday, and the family's 6-year-old son had a strep throat, so they had to leave him home with a sitter while they went off to church. And when they came home bearing palms. And he said, well, what are those palms for? And his mother said, people held them over Jesus' head as he walked by. And the little boy said, wouldn't you know it, the one Sunday that I don't go, Jesus shows up. So today is Palm Sunday, the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem with all of the fanfare that came with it. And Yogananda, who has this beautiful way of bringing all the teachings of the different world religions together, has this reflection. He said, spiritually interpreted as relevant to humanity in every age, Jesus' triumphant entry into the city of Jerusalem inspires a beautiful symbology. And all of this in the metaphysical level is something that speaks to something that's true for each and every one of us. So here's what he says. Our consciousness is the city of Jerusalem. Our thoughts and feelings are its inhabitants. Jesus coming into Jerusalem evokes the opening of the gates of our devotion to receive Christ consciousness. Our devotion to meditation, to prayer, to all of our various spiritual practices. It opens the gates to this thing called Christ consciousness. And it says, to receive the Christ consciousness in its omniscient power in our bodily kingdom with all of its citizens, our thoughts, our feelings, our selves. Rejoicing, blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. As I say that, I can feel all of my cells vibrating with joy at the truth of what I'm speaking, of this, this perspective that Yogananda shares. Because isn't that what it's all about? It's not just about some person far off in the past. It's what is the message for me here and now when I hear this story of Jesus entering into Jerusalem, the Christ consciousness entering into our very body temple. So this month is a month exploring the power of vulnerability as a vital part of receiving this thing called Christ consciousness, which goes by other names too in different cultures. We could call it our divine selves, our higher selves, the Buddha consciousness. It's all really talking about the same thing, that consciousness of oneness when the divine nature fills every cell, every thought, every emotion of our being. Glory in the highest. So vulnerability then is a key ingredient for our own personal transformation because it creates an expanded awareness of what lies in the subconscious mind that is inhibiting, delaying, denying, or blocking the expression of that divine nature. Vulnerability is key to this path to self-realization, and that's with a capital S. It is key. And those of us who've been on the planet for quite a while have learned that to be true. Hopefully we've learned that to be true. And we can always open more to this thing that we call the power of vulnerability. And as we understand how vital it is for us as individuals, it's also vital as a community. It's vital as a world. I was thinking of Fetterman, how vulnerable he's been in sharing what's been going on with him. Now, does that make people run in the other direction? No. I mean, from my perspective, what it does is it opens my heart to him. And so he is really a great example who's on the world stage right now of someone who's willing to be vulnerable about what's going on in his life. So to unleash the power of vulnerability, then, we must define it and then align with it by practicing it. And that's what today is all about. So we'll be exploring 3 different things. What is vulnerability? What it isn't? And why it's so vitally important. So what is vulnerability? I'm just going to use just a little section out of Brene Brown's. She said it's the willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open and willing to love and be loved. It's part of being willing to love and be loved. Being open with what's going on within us. So to be vulnerable then is to explore the inner world of ourselves, our thoughts and our feelings, for the purpose of fostering the fuller expression of our divine nature, which is love. So here are some examples of vulnerability. We've been sharing a lot of them over this last year. The first is sharing our perspectives, even when it's challenging. It might be something different from somebody else's perspective. Another example of vulnerability, being honest about our mistakes and our limiting ideas. Could be vulnerable to feel difficult emotions and share them with others. Just like Jen did when she said she was feeling a little nervous. Did that make anybody want to run the other way and say, oh my gosh? No, we all wanted to say, Jen, we love you. You're safe with us. And it's also being honest about our boundaries and our expectations. It's also being honest about that. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jim, because I'm going to mention your book. I hope you're okay with that. So Jim Crum, who's one of our members, he's in the second row next to Reverend Mary Ann, is an author. I don't know how many of you knew that. And he wrote a book called Learning to Listen, Observe, Value, and Encourage. And the acronym of LOVE is in there, later in life. So I read this book, and I was struck by the amazing level of vulnerability that Jim was willing to, as he shared his challenges, his life challenges, his perspectives that weren't serving him, his actions that weren't serving him, and then what he learned in the process, the wisdom gained. And then also, I think what was so touching was he shared how powerful experiences like his work in men's groups, his learnings from past relationships, and his ongoing learning about love from his current relationship with Reverend Mary Ann. And it's so beautiful. These are people in our community who, and just sharing from a very deep place. But what is the purpose? See, the idea is, what is the purpose behind it? And I'm very clear, his purpose was to express his love for his reader, wanting to share that wisdom. Oh, we have the books for sale. Okay. Yeah, in the bookstore. Great. And so the purpose comes from that desire to love and be loved. Right, Jim?
Right.
Yeah. And that's what vulnerability is. That's healthy vulnerability. And we all benefit from it. And it allows us to move more fully into that radiant expression of who we are. So this is what vulnerability is not. And it's something that is called trauma dumping. Trauma dumping is oversharing a trauma with no sense of how it may affect the other person and no sense of how it sabotages relationships, and really with no specific purpose to love and be loved. It's really just about, dumping it, getting it out. It's telling a personal story of trauma in explicit detail. It's repeating the story over and over to multiple people, even strangers. It's showing a lack of interest in the listener's point of view, and it's showing no interest in the listener, not giving the listener even a chance to share. That's trauma dumping. And the thing I want to mention about it is that for a period of time in my life, I was attracting relationships that were like that. I had learned to be a counselor, and I'd learned all these listening skills, active listening, so I would do all this active listening. I'm not saying every single relationship, but I had a few relationships like this in the past. And so I was so willing to practice empathy and to listen and to support the person. And what happened is as soon as I wanted to share about my life, and I can vividly remember a specific situation where, okay, I had, I had just given a lot of love to this person, and now I wanted to share what was going on in my life. Blank, no interest, goodbye, see you later. I mean, literally, I've got to go, see you later. So, I mean, that's an example of trauma dumping. There's no concern for the other person. It's just, I just want to get this out. So, here's the thing about, and so I want to bring some compassion to those who trauma dump. I don't want to, make it sound like it's something that is not um, worthy of well, not worthy of compassion. It is worthy of compassion because repeatedly talking about a traumatic event is a sign that someone is feeling empty inside, that there is some unhealed emotions that need support. And my go-to for that is an author by the name of Greg Bear. He's been in the past. He came to a lot of the CSL communities, and I actually saw him down at the Falls Church Center for Celebration Center for Spiritual Living quite a few years ago. And he has a book called Real Love, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's so powerful, and it speaks to this thing about the traumatic dumping, the person who is feeling empty of love. And he said he says real love, first of all, is the ability to care unconditionally about the happiness of another person. I'm going to say that again. And we're talking about unconditional love, right? Real love is the ability to care unconditionally about the happiness of another person. So the person who is emotionally drowning, then, he uses the term emotionally drowning, uses what's called getting and protecting behaviors to try to fill that inner sense of emptiness, getting and protecting. And so the example he gives in Real Love is he said, when a person is emotionally drowning, it is like the person is in a pool, the deep end of a pool, and they're emotionally drowning. And if you're not coming from a place of unconditional, real love, what happens is you jump into the pool, and what happens? The person pulls you down with them. You both go down together. So when in those situations where you can't handle a certain situation, it's okay. And what Greg Bear says is get out of the water. Get out of the water. Because both of you going down is not serving. You get out of the water and you find someone who embodies real love. He calls them wise men and women that are among us. It could be someone who is just embodies that, but it could also be a therapist, a spiritual practitioner, one of our licensed practitioners, a minister, myself. And this doesn't mean, of course, that you shouldn't ever talk about hard things. We're not talking about that at all. Because we have circles, we have classes, we have places here in the center. We have wise men and women who are all throughout the congregation as well that can support you and are maybe willing to support you if you ask. And the thing is if we can create a place in which it's okay to be vulnerable with each other, then we have a greater chance of truly evolving in consciousness, and not only individually, but as an entire community. That's the power of knowing this. Again, wise men and wise women care unconditionally for the happiness of others. And so what is important then, the difference between trauma dumping and vulnerability, I just want to re-emphasize this, is the intention behind it. If the intention is for the purpose of transforming a mindset that keeps us stuck in our stories, that keeps us from growing as in unconditional love, then it is vulnerability and it's healthy and it is supportive. With practice, we can develop self-awareness to know what is appropriate to share, in what situation, with whom, and to be sensitive in how sharing impacts the listening of others. So it's really that whole realm. But we learn that by practicing. By practicing. So why is vulnerability important then? In the book called Shameless by Nadia Bolz, B-O-L-Z, Weber, W-E-B-E-R, she writes, after the resurrection, Jesus presented his wounds to his grieving friends. In John 20:20, it says, Jesus came and stood among his disciples and said, peace be with you. And then he goes on to just summarize it. She goes on to summarize it. She says, then he showed them his hands and his side. He did not try to hide the mark from the spear, nor conceal the injured hands. Jesus was unashamed of his wounded body. He was also unafraid of human bodies that he encountered throughout his ministry. Those with disease, if you think about the lepers and those who were diseased and so on. He never recoiled from it. And he knew that in his resurrection, he would be known by his brokenness and scars. Isn't that interesting to think about? I hadn't thought about that perspective. But isn't that true for us as well, is what she goes on to say. She says, we can only really know and be known when we show how life has marked us, our pain and our failure, the things that we so often try to hide. Those are the things that give us texture. And without texture, there is nothing for others to connect to. Interesting. Greg Bear, in his book Real Love, agrees with this perspective. He says, he talks about how important it is to share our flaws with wise men and wise women for our healing, and to find out that even though we share it, we're still loved. Then we can kind of let go of that and stop feeling like we need to hide it all the time. And vulnerability, I am not going to overlook the fact that in this culture, vulnerability is considered a weakness. And in truth, when you consider that it helps you release inner barriers to love, it is definitely not a weakness. It is a superpower. It is a superpower. So as we choose to be vulnerable, it's a choice to create safe communities, safe relationships in which we can thrive and experience personal and community transformation. Vulnerability empowers us to be our unique expression of life, while also extending the same invitation to others, calling forth their unique expression of life. So let's just say the affirmation again now that we are more steeped in what we've been saying or what we've been talking about. So repeat after me. I bring my own unique expression to life.
I bring my own unique expression to life.
And create a safe space for others to do the same. Breathe. So now I'm going to give you an opportunity to turn to either... Hello there. For those of you online, there's a bird that keeps jumping up to peek and see what's going on inside here. So what I'd like you to do is turn to one or two other people, so either dyads or triads, and share. What is my key? Let's do this first. Let's do the neuroscience thing. Let's yawn and stretch. Oh, you can even stand up if you want to. Yawn and stretch. All right, and sit down. Go within, listen deeply, and I'm going to pose a question to you. What is my major takeaway about vulnerability today? What is it that I choose to take with me? And then find somebody to share that with. Can you feel the love coming from my heart for all of you? Because I'm in one of those moments right now. I'm so grateful that all of you are so willing to be vulnerable with each other and share deeply from your hearts, because this truly is, vulnerability cannot be underrated. It's our willingness to be vulnerable that truly is key, and I'm going to say that again, key to transformation in consciousness, to bringing up the stuff that's not serving us so that we can look at it and let it go. If we don't, it stays stuck. We're stuck in our stories. It doesn't serve us. So thank you so much, everyone, for your willingness. I really appreciate it. And know that as we continue to expand in our ability to be vulnerable, that we not only grow and transform, we build trust, empathy, understanding, and intimacy in our relationships. Isn't that what we all want? Yeah. And so as we engage in vulnerability, we also therefore strengthen our connection with the spirit of all life. And we're able to see through the eyes of love. We're able to be those wise men and women that people seek out to help them transform. So let's just turn within and give thanks for this opportunity to deepen into this beautiful, powerful, this superpower of vulnerability. Let's give thanks that we have a community in which we are able to practice that safely. And let us also give thanks for the ever-present omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience of the one source of all life, which I call God, that is ever supporting us through this entire process, that is seeking, as Ernest Holmes says, seeking to press itself in us, through us, and as us as greater, freer, fuller, more expanded expression of our lives, our unique, glorious, diverse lives. And so let us raise our arms in celebration and in joy, in freedom, as we say together, yes, and so it is. Woo! And now our beloved Sharon